Hello and welcome to another slimy episode of Saved by the 90s. My name is Adam Patterson. With me today we got the guy who always gets off the ground when Kevin Bacon tells him to. Ken Bakley. Hey, Ken.
Hello.
When combing through the bounty of January releases this month, we noticed a pattern that there were an inordinate amount of monster movies released during the decade. So we decided to take a look at 4 of them this month. Not only that, but we're going to keep the monster train running and discuss 2 episodes from one of the most popular TV shows of the decade as well. So don't bother hiding because this is Saved by the 90s.
The hitchhiking ghost that is scaring the wits out of Chicago motorists. Meet Resurrection Mary. Toads that live in stones. The half rabbit, half antelope, and a real-life mermaid. Welcome to the world of monsters and miracles. I'm Corbin Burnson. Join me on The Extraordinary.
Friday at 9 on WNAL TV 44.
Adam wrote the next part of the script, but asked me to read it, so here it goes. Our first film is hands down one of the greatest monster movies ever made, and not only that, one of the defining films of the 90s. Featuring all-star performances from Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Michael Gross, and Reba McEntire, this is the undisputed 1990 classic, Tremors.
They're coming!
The good old days of good old monster movies are back. Tremors.
It was funny. It's humongous. Slimy. Full of goo.
That's scary!
Yeah, we'll take your word for it.
The scariest monster movie since Aliens, says sneak previews.
Bloodthirsty, that creature.
Action-packed.
It's a wild film.
And Time Magazine raves, Tremors is bound to become a classic. Yeah! Tremors, rated PG-13. Starts tomorrow at theaters everywhere.
I love finding those ones with audience reactions. Those are the best. Those are the best.
They don't really put out trailers like that anymore, do they?
Not really, no.
I guess everyone just posts their video reviews on YouTube now anyway.
Pretty much, yeah. Released on January 19th, 1990, and directed by Ron Underwood, Tremors involves the natives of a small isolated town who must defend themselves against strange underground creatures which are killing them one by one. Now, we'll start with you, Ken. Tremors, one of my all-time favorites, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, Ken. So what did you think of Tremors?
You know, I had a pretty fun time with Tremors. I think I'd seen parts of it before, but I don't think I'd seen the whole thing. But yeah, it's a really well-done movie that has, like, really good control of a very specific tone and, like, carries it throughout. Like, it's very admirably, solidly done on that level.
There's almost nothing that I don't like about Tremors. There's almost nothing that I don't love about Tremors. From that opening title card, first of all, love the title card in Tremors.
So title cards are very important.
They have a lot of weight to me. The title card holds maybe too much weight for me. But
my favorite kind of title card is always the title card that makes it as big as possible.
Yes, I agree with that. That's my preferred. And also a title card that comes at least 10 minutes after the movie starts.
Yes. My ideal title card would be a title card that appears 37 minutes into the movie and takes up the entire screen. So like and preferably makes a loud noise when it appears too.
So like Mandy. Did you see Mandy? Because that's exactly what happens in Mandy.
Oh, excellent. I was thinking, in terms of very loud title cards, there's very few title cards that I can think of that are louder than the one in Ghost, where it appears right away, but it's like this giant, like, orchestral crash. Very scary. Like, very much frightened me the first time I saw Ghost. I was not expecting the title card to scream at me.
Didn't know this was actually a horror movie.
Yeah. I thought this is it. This is Ghost. It's a ghost movie, but it's not a horror movie. But apparently it was.
So if you're not familiar with Tremors, first of all, pause this, go watch Tremors, then come back. But it stars Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, 2 buddies, Val and Earl. They're trying to get out of this little podunk town that they're in, Paradise. They're trying to get out. They finally decide they're going to do it. They pack up, go to leave, and then, as fate would have it, the town is terrorized by these underground worm creatures. And there's so much that I think this movie does right when it comes to crafting a a horror comedy. Like it's just this perfect blend of comedy and horror. Much of the horror, almost the entire movie, takes place during the daytime in the blistering desert sun. So you don't have any of these like kind of cheap scares. And it also, I think, shooting a movie in the daylight. Now there is one scene that happens at nighttime, which is a really great set piece, but
Oh yeah.
they can't skimp out on the effects, because it's all for the most part done during the day. So they got to really focus on the effects work of these graboids. And even watching it today, man, I feel like the creature effects really hold up for this movie. These things look real to me.
Yeah.
There's like one scene that looks, I think, really bad, and that's when the graboids attack Reba McEntire and Michael Gross's house, and they bust through the basement, and the two of them are just blasting them away because they're like these preppers. And
it's a great scene, though.
It's a great scene, but there is one scene where the graboid and the two of them are both in frame, but it's like composited in, and it looks so bad.
Well,
but I mean,
for a 30 years old next week, I guess, next week from when we're recording this, a 30-year-old movie, this effects heavy, where all the effects are basically in daylight with full light on them, and having only one scene that genuinely looks like it's poorly aged, is really good.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a slight knock on it. And that's just a slight thing that shows its age. But everything else, man, the creatures look so good. Like every scene, because they're underground. So you don't see them a lot, but when you do see them, they're very detailed, and their movements look natural. Like when Val and Earl kill the first one, when they are examining it, it just looks like an organic creature. Still impressed with the effects work.
Now, since we watched a lot of these movies in such a short time span, and we'll talk about them all in a short time span, I noticed certain through lines, and I find that one through line that's very important is making the creatures in question as just making them excrete all as much horrifying and mysterious slime as possible.
Oh, big time.
And I think Tremors is definitely very good.
Oh yeah. There's a lot
delivering slime.
There is a ton of slime in this, and I love how they're just throughout the whole movie, they're just commenting on how bad it stinks. And I feel like that's something that doesn't happen a whole lot in monster movies, where you would imagine that it would stink.
I would, yes.
I also would like to mention that this has an $11 million budget. It had an $11 million budget. A movie that we're going to be talking about later had a $45 million budget and looks utter garbage compared to this.
Yes, it does. When we get to that movie, we'll discuss it in detail. But there are shots in that movie where I literally was like taken aback by how terrible it looked. Like, not like terrible for now, terrible for then.
Yeah, and it came out many years later. It came out at the end of the decade, towards the end of the decade. So that movie has no excuse when looking at the creature effects. I think
might make up for it in other ways, though, but we'll get to it when we get to it.
I think that the set pieces are what makes this movie so memorable. There are so many incredibly memorable moments, from the pole vaulting scene to the scene when Finn Carter as Rhonda gets caught up in the barbed wire, just moment after moment. Oh, and of course the scene when the creatures finally make it to the town and they're chasing them, and it goes under like the boardwalk thing, and you see the boardwalk going up. Just every moment. This is a movie that is it's like an hour. It's a standard movie length. It's an hour and 36 minutes long. To me, when I watch this movie, it feels like it's 10 minutes long.
Yeah, it's breezes by.
Yeah, the pacing, I find it to be just almost perfect in its pacing, where they ease you into the next big set piece. And I think that's helped by the really great cast. I mean, not just Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, but even like Michael Gross and Reba McEntire as the prepper people, and you have Finn Carter as the seismologist who's there seeing what's going on. So you have a really great cast, and I think that that's also aided by a really solid script. It's funny. I think the dialogue is clever. It checks all the boxes for me.
Yeah, it is a movie that has such like great control in just being able to move things along and also keep a consistent tone when there's otherwise like a considerable amount of balance here just between the different elements of this movie, but just to handle it so well and so effortlessly, like you don't feel any of this work happening. It just feels so inherent and natural to the world of the movies it goes by, and it's just a sign of it is quite skillfully written.
It's funny because this has been truly a monster weekend for me. In addition to these movies, I saw Underwater, which came out in theaters the weekend that we were recording this, and I feel like they all share the same DNA. All of them. A lot of them have very similar beats, and I feel like this movie does such a great job. And the thing about this movie, a lot of these monster movies, you have a group of people, and then they're getting picked off one by one by one. And yes, some people die in this, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. For the most part, all of the people, the main people, make it through, and I find that to be kind of refreshing too. It's not that there are some shocking deaths in it where you like that idiot neighbor who gets on top of the tire, like that's gonna do anything. And then the one of the things that always scared me as a kid when I was watching this would be the farmer, the old farmer guy, when they find him and like all his sheep are just completely destroyed, and they pick up his hat and his head is there with that death face on.
When this movie does want to be like genuinely unsettling, in addition to how funny it is that too. It's all the things it wants to be in pretty consistent measure.
It's fairly suspenseful too. Like the scene when they're in the general store and they have to, Rhonda has to hop on all of the shelves, and it knocks over the shelves, and all, just pretty much every big moment is genuinely suspenseful. I think this is how you make a monster movie to me.
Yeah.
It's also, this is PG-13. I think that this movie proves that you don't need a horror movie to be at night and be grisly and R-rated to have it be successful and have it cater to an audience of horror fans. It was originally rated R. There were 20 F-bombs in the original cut. And you can see, when you watch this, if you pay attention, you can hear when they dubbed them out. There's one egregious one where I think it was Michael Gross. It was Michael Gross when they killed the Tremor that busted into their basement, and he says like, "We got that mother humper," and it was just like, that doesn't work.
Yeah, I remember hearing that line. I did not know that it actually was a concerted effort to get the rating down, but I remember hearing that and think, that doesn't sound like what a line of dialogue is supposed to be.
No. This is a movie that I can just quote. I quote this movie all the time. I'm always quoting this movie. Usually it's like Reba McEntire and what's his name? Why do I always forget Michael Gross? I always forget Michael Gross's name. And usually it's a line
Stephen
from
Keaton.
them. Yeah, that's right.
The dad on Family Ties.
Family Ties. I used to love that show, by the way. I was a big Michael J. Fox. I guess I still am. Big Michael J. Fox fan. But I always say, broke into the wrong goddamn rec room. And the Reba McEntire, you didn't even get penetration with the Elven gun.
They're just great lines. It's just, I suppose you'd have to have specific circumstances to invoke them otherwise.
Not me. I just randomly say them. I will randomly say them. Pretty much any movie that I quote, it's a random line that I will say at a random time.
Oh, I can do that too.
Keep it fresh. I will say that so we saw this on Netflix. It is on Netflix, and the quality is not great.
Looks bad.
Yeah. Does not look very good. There is a Blu-ray version of this out.
Apparently, it's also bad.
But according to Blu-ray.com, it's not good.
This might just be the Blu-ray.
I think it is. I'm pretty sure this is the Blu-ray version. I think it was an early Blu-ray, like when that technology was first coming out, and so maybe the transfer is just not very good. I'm hoping. I mean, this movie seems like it needs like a special like Shout Factory needs to release this movie. Come on,
It's the year of the 30th anniversary.
yeah. I have a feeling.
Yeah, what is crazy about the transfer on Netflix is I haven't seen. Maybe this exists on other ones. I've never seen it before. I think it really is just taken from the Blu-ray because it starts with the FBI warnings.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Never seen that before.
And I mean, this isn't a very obscure movie either. You know, this is a pretty popular movie. I don't think it did very well, but it did good enough to spawn 4 sequels, maybe. I actually lost track of how many sequels there are to this movie.
It appears that there's are 7 in total.
7 Tremors movies, so
Yes.
6 sequels. Dear God.
The 7th is apparently coming out in 2020 and does have Michael Gross in it.
Well, most of the sequels have Michael Gross.
Well, good for him.
I think almost all of them. Tremors 4 also has Michael Gross, even though Tremors 4 takes place in the Wild West.
Does he time travel?
Years and years and years ago, before Blu-ray, they had the Tremors Attack Pack, which had all of them up to, I think, 4. And I attempted to watch them. You know,
I feel like attempt's the operative word here.
yeah, you know, I mean, I think I did end up, I didn't finish 4. I remember starting 4 and I was like, nope, just not, that's not going to happen. I did watch 2 and 3. You know, normally on this show, when we do a movie that turns into a franchise, I will watch all of them.
And you're a better man than I for doing that.
I mean, I did watch Showgirls 2. So
you deserve so much credit for actually watching that.
But in this case, I just can't. I can't do it. Number 2, the second one, is really bad. Fred Ward comes back for that one. And the Tremors are like, they're able to walk. They grow legs and they're able to walk.
Good for them.
And I'm like, it takes the whole point of it. The thing that was so fun about Tremors and that made them scary was that they were underneath of you. They came up from the ground and got you.
What do they even look like if they're walking?
They're little. It's pretty much like just the head part.
Ah,
it's not
because
like,
I was like imagining like they wouldn't be like towering.
Right. Yeah. It's not like a full size one.
This is terrible. The first thing that came to my mind were that they'd be like the fish man from The Shape of Water.
Yeah, it's really bad. The third one, I don't remember. I literally remember nothing about. The fourth one I said was in the Old West, the Wild West. It's like the origin of the graboids. The fifth one, Tremors Bloodlines. I actually did see that one too. That's with Jamie Kennedy, I think, and Michael Gross. Michael Gross has like some kind of show, like some kind of survival man type show, and it's almost like a found footage type thing.
Mm-hmm. There's an 11-year gap between 4 and 5.
Yeah, I think Tremors 5 might be a Sci-Fi Channel, like a sci-fi original.
It looks like it.
And then there was another one. The one of them was like in ice. It was like
Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell.
Yeah. See, the problem
direct to Netflix, apparently.
See, the problem with these is that I remember there was in the second one they used CG, and once they did turn the graboids into like CG creatures, it just wasn't the same. But everything else about them was terrible too. I mean, all the sequels were bad. That's why I was excited for the TV show. So the Sci-Fi Channel was going to do a Tremors TV show, and it was produced by Kevin Bacon, and he was going to be coming back to star in it. And they shot a pilot, but it didn't get picked up. And there is a trailer. I think Kevin Bacon himself released the trailer for it. Like, this was like way after that they didn't pick it up. He was like, screw it, and just put the trailer out for people to enjoy. And it looks like it was going to be pretty good. So that's a bit of a bummer that they didn't move forward with the TV show. I'm hoping that this franchise gets in the right hands someday and they make like a proper, I don't know if it needs a sequel or just a reboot or just another story that's not one of these horrible
like with the
ones.
Different strains, like between the attempted TV show and all the sequels and then trying to make another sequel. It would be like the Halloween movie to keep retconning everything.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, they gotta start over.
This is the real Tremors 2.
Like if you're not bringing Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward back, just forget it. Just start something fresh and put a decent budget behind it too. But anyway,
our next feature is based on the novel by Jack Finney, which was previously adapted to film in 1956, then again in 1978, and then a fourth time in 2007. Directed by Abel Ferrara and released on January 28th, 1994, this is Body Snatchers.
There's something in the air, and it feels like fear. There's something in the night, and it seems like terror. There's someone in your bed, and it looks like you.
Mommy?
Life will be simpler now. The only thing missing,
Mommy?
will be you.
Mommy?
What's the matter, honey? What's the matter?
Body Snatchers. The invasion continues.
a teenage girl and her father discover alien clones are replacing humans on a remote U.S. military base in Alabama. You know, this is the first time I saw this, actually. For me, Abel Ferrara is traditionally, Abel Ferrara is a hit or miss type of guy. I either love what he's got going on or I hate what he's got going on. I think this is the first time I saw one of his movies where I was just like, yeah, that was fine. Mm-hmm. You know, like, and that was pretty much the end of it. I have very few notes about this, except it begins with some terrible voiceover, which continues a couple times, if I'm remembering correctly.
It's very odd about when the voiceover is there and when it is not.
I did not like the voiceover at all. I thought it was absolutely awful by Gabrielle Anwar. It's not her fault or anything. I think that it's not that the delivery was bad or anything like that. It's just that I don't think it was necessary and could have been omitted completely. So you have Gabrielle Anwar as Marty Malone, moves to this town with her stepmom and dad and her stepbrother. And I guess their dad, played by Terry Kinney, he's working on some kind of project. He's consulting with the military over this it's like a chemical thing going on. He's like testing chemicals and stuff.
Never a good sign in the movies.
And turns out that almost by the time they get there, I think pretty much the whole town has already been taken over by the aliens. Yeah, it's your classic Body Snatchers story. It's probably the most the grossest. It's probably the most adult version of this story that is out there. I think all the other stories have been fairly tame in comparison. But the funny thing is, like, this movie totally didn't have to be R-rated. It just is. It just was. Like the 78 version is PG, and I know that Invasion is PG-13. I'm pretty sure. The Invasion, rather. So you just have this like random full frontal nudity in this movie that just seems so unnecessary. But you know, it's Abel Ferrara. It's funny to see. I think this is probably like the most mainstream Abel Ferrara movie I've seen out of his filmography.
Like, it does, yeah. There's a lot of Abel Ferrara going on here, and there's also a lot of not Abel Ferrara going on here. Not that it's not Abel Ferrara, it's just that, yes, it does feel more mainstreamed in a way. I guess I would also say that.
Yeah, more like a studio film than a straight up down and dirty Abel Ferrara movie. It's funny though, because like you said, I you do see shades of Abel Ferrara in this, which I actually wasn't really expecting. I thought that he was probably maybe just doing this for a paycheck or something and just went through the motions and spit it out. But I think there was more to it than that. I think that he seemed to want to make a statement on something, whether it's what we're doing to the environment or something like that. Usually that's what
I mean, the setting feels like it could also, I don't know, feed into some, blind support for the military-industrial complex just based on its setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought for the most part it worked. I thought the effects work was tremendous in this. I thought the effects work in this movie was insane.
Yes.
We're talking like The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing level effects work. Almost. Not quite at that level, but just because it wasn't quite as complex as what they did in that movie. But so if you're not familiar with the Invasion of the Body Snatchers story, it's like these alien pods, and the pods essentially clone the human and turn the pod into an alien version of that person. And in this movie, after it sucks the whatever juice out of a human, the human just kind of like disintegrates. And it's like they're filled with air and they deflate. So the people just deflate and turn to dust.
It's such a great effect.
I loved the scene when at the end when they were at the base and there was like that room where they were like converting tons of people, and you just see like deflate as he was walking down the down the hall or the room, and you just saw one after another like the deflating people.
Gotta respect it.
I think that the most impressive thing though was just how the pods shot out these like really gross looking tendrils and like wrapped around your face and went into your nose and your mouth.
Yeah,
and stuff.
that is I think the finest and most unpleasant to view, but also mesmerizing effect in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, especially like I think the first time you see it is when Marty is in the bath and the pod like plops into the bathtub and like starts to infect her as she's taking a little nap in the bathtub. They got to get you when you're asleep. That's the thing. So you have Forrest Whitaker in this is this really crazy major.
What a great performance.
He is nuts in this movie. He's just off the rails. I think because he's all hopped up on speed because he doesn't want to sleep because he knows they're going to get him when he falls asleep.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think certainly the effects work is the highlight. I think everything else is pretty standard 90s fare.
Yeah, there's definitely moments where it feels like you can palpably sense Ferrara's identity and his messaging coming through here. But even when it feels more generic, it's still, very competent and pretty well done. So it's certainly, there's certainly very few outright complaints you can make with this movie, aside from perhaps just the bizarre decisions upon when to use the voiceover and how you work that. But otherwise, this is, at worst, it's capable, and at best, it is pretty impressive.
I thought the kid, the stepbrother, Andy, played by Riley Murphy, I thought that he did a really good job. It's rare that I compliment child actors, but I thought that this kid did a really great job of looking creeped out, and like especially like at the beginning when he goes to class and they all have the same picture and he's like holding his up and his isn't the same and he's like looking around like, what is going on here? There's something going on. Like he immediately knows something's up. Mm-hmm. And also like when it took over his mom, he just immediately knew like, oh, that's not my mom. He saw her get deflated, and then of course you have the full frontal nudity. I thought that he did just a really great job. And then after you find out that he got turned to, and he turns into this like a nightmare little, like the kid from Pet Sematary, and when he gets pushed out of a helicopter. So in this movie, you do get to see a kid get thrown out of a helicopter and fall to his doom.
Very much the in terms of bad children in movies that I've seen lately. Feels like a spiritual sibling to Samara Weaving punching that kid that shot her and punching him in the head in Ready or Not.
Yeah, loved that scene.
I saw Ready or Not last week. Good movie.
I really enjoyed that movie. The kid falling out of the helicopter was great, but it unfortunately back in the 90s they still weren't quite sure how to show people falling from large heights, so it doesn't look great.
Mm-hmm.
I also wasn't a big fan of the end when the slow-mo voiceover of the mom that happened at the end. I was just like, what is going on here? Like, why does it sounds so bad? And but overall, I had a good time with it.
It's pretty good. It's pretty all right.
I think when we reviewed King of New York, I said that I thought that was the most like mainstream of Ferrara's movies that I had seen at the time, and I now say that this is the most mainstream of Ferrara's movies that I've seen.
Yeah, there's a
or accessible. I think I said accessible.
Yeah, accessible. Like you kind of have to be more attuned to specifically what Ferrara is doing with something like King of New York. Like I hadn't seen very many Ferrara movies besides these two, but just in a general sense, you have to be like into what he's doing stylistically, or you're not going to get much out of it at all. This one, it feels like you could kind of come at it from any number of directions, even on just like a basic genre level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least not be disappointed.
Ever wonder what lives beneath your streets?
He was attacked by something down in the sewer.
Friday, Agents Mulder and Scully go looking, and what they find will terrify you.
This is not a man, it's a monster.
Nature didn't make this thing. We did.
And all new X-Files, Friday at 9, 8 Central.
We saw plenty of horror and science fiction shows throughout the 90s, but none were quite as prolific as the X-Files. I remember watching every episode religiously, first when it was on Friday nights, and then when it switched over to Sundays after Fox's animation lineup.
Created by Chris Carter, the show ran for 218 episodes across 11 seasons, plus 2 feature films, and became a pop culture phenomenon, hailed as the cultural touchstone of the 1990s. This month, we're going to be looking at 2 of their Monster of the Week episodes, Season 2's The Host and Season 7's X-Cops. All right, so I'm not terribly familiar with like specific episodes of the X-Files. Obviously, I know about it and its cultural impact, but yeah, I haven't had too many opportunities to at least, watch multiple episodes in relatively short succession and then discuss it. So let's start with The Host, which is so admirably, completely nauseating television.
Yeah. I remember this. It's funny because like I haven't seen the X-Files since it was on. I never went back and rewatched any of the episodes. I think like a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start rewatching the X-Files, and I got through like the first episode of the first season. And that was like it. But it's so when I'm going back and watching some of these episodes, they're like coming back to me as I'm watching them, and this was definitely one of them. I remember they used the creature that's in this as like a promo, like in part of their like promo clips for like a really long time. Like I just remember seeing that creature over and over again. And I
mean, it's hard to forget.
Yeah, because it lives in sewage.
Mm-hmm. So
the basic premise of this is that you have this mutated flatworm or fluke worm creature, humanoid fluke worm creature who is eating people in the sewer. And Mulder and Scully, of course, have to go take care of it, see what's going on.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of poop in this.
Yes.
A lot of sewage. I love the scene when the creature escapes, and so they catch it. It gets caught in like the sewage system, like the treatment facility, in like a tube, and they catch it and they put it in like a cell, and then they're transporting it. It escapes and it hides in a porta potty and gets sucked up when they empty the porta potty out. There's a lot of gross episodes of the X-Files.
Yes, but this particular episode is just full of all sorts of wonderful surprises.
Now, you said you're not super familiar with the series, although I'm sure that you know kind of the broad strokes of you know, what the show's all about. It's funny going back and watching it now because I still think to this day that it was like one of the most unique shows on network television. I mean,
absolutely.
There's just nothing like it. And
yeah, like
and to this day, when you see what's on, like what network TV dramas there are, they're all just these like formulaic procedurals. This show, it was something wildly different every week.
Even just from my limited breadth of knowledge about the X-Files, just to watch this and think this was on network television in the 90s, and there's really not a whole lot you could compare it to. It's just one of those things that has a legacy that's just so singular that you have ways that it's impacted the landscape of television, but not in a sense that there's any one future strain of television that you can say that is post X-Files television, because in a way it's one of those things where like everything kind of feels like it's post X-Files television.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that we're very lucky to have the TV lineup that we do now. I mean, not including the Amazon Prime shows and the Netflix shows and all of that, but even a lot of the network shows are pretty solid. I would say it's pretty much basic cable shows that are like a lot better, but there's still some good network TV out there. And back then, that wasn't necessarily the case. It was just there's a lot of sitcoms, and you know, Law and Order was around, and some other like crime procedurals and stuff, but they just
If we do ever talk about the like Law and Order franchise at any point in this podcast, that will be the TV show that I can talk for a very long time about.
I mean, we can definitely talk about SVU, because I think SVU started up in the 90s.
99.
There you go. So, wow, you're like an encyclopedia of Law and Order over here.
I'm not really an encyclopedia of Law and Order. I just like, I couldn't tell you about Law and Order. I could just tell you the general vicinity of it, just because, like, you know, I've seen, because you can't turn on television and go through basic cable without seeing, in one's average lifespan, what feels like trillions of episodes of the Law and Order franchise.
Yeah, I know we should be talking about X-Files, but I just want to say I love on USA, the insanely specific Law and Order marathons that they come up with.
You can make them very specific.
I love that. So covering these two episodes made me really want to go back and rewatch the show proper. And my goal was to watch through the first season and up to this episode, which was season 2, episode 2. But I realized there's 24 episodes in the first season, and that was not going to be happening for me.
One thing you would have to think about is, you know, in the era of, and I still don't know how I feel about this phrase, peak TV, there are not very long television seasons anymore.
Right.
Even on network, the seasons are getting a little bit shorter. It feels weird to go back to a time, even just more than a few years ago, when shows ran 24 episodes a season.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I kind of forgot that even the hour-long dramas were 24 episodes a season. So, yeah, needless to say, I did not get caught up with season 2, episode 2, and where we were, which kind of bummed me out, because there were like certain things that they were talking about in the episode that we watched, the host, that I was like, man, I'm kind of, how did this happen? Like, where did we, because it for the most part, the episodes were serialized. You could watch an episode by itself, and usually it wasn't tied to any specific other, like, you know, through line, except for the alien episodes, like the extraterrestrial episodes involving the government and stuff like that, because that was like a really big through line through the whole series. Usually you could, especially the Monster of the Week episodes, you could just watch those as standalone things and enjoy them for what they were. And that's what these two were. The host, I think, is a classic episode. I think it's one, I think most people will remember that disgusting creature,
don't forget it.
Yeah, that white creature. And I like the fact that one, like, Mulder cuts it in half at the end, but it survives because that it's essentially a worm, so it survives.
I was just thinking, like, I can't really think of another show, at least not one prominently running right now, that actually does split entire episodes between, like, a serialized arc and just week-to-week self-contained storylines. Because that would be my ideal way of consuming television if, like, all shows were like that.
Yeah, I mean, The Mandalorian just concluded, and that does follow a sort of similar style where he's on this like long mission, but each episode is its own kind of self-contained thing with its own characters. You could almost watch that show out of order as well. But you're right, there's not too many shows that are able to kind of straddle that line between long form and then just, bite-sized week to week cases. And I think that it does it really well. I mean, my favorites were always the Monster of the Week episodes anyway. Like, I think probably everybody likes those the most, just because they were usually the really crazy ones, the ones that were really fun. And I just find those to be more interesting than the space alien stuff and the government conspiracy stuff. Although I think that there's still a place for that in this show. Now, admittedly, neither of us are X-Files experts. There's entire podcasts devoted to the X-Files. It's funny, like when I'm like looking for information on the X-Files, like, because we were like, oh, let's pick 2 episodes of the X-Files, and it's like there's so much information. It was so easy to find 2 episodes to cover. And like when I was searching for the like bumper that I wanted to use before we started this segment, it was just right there, like X-Files TV spots, and you could just pick. They had every TV spot for every episode for every season. So like for this episode, season 2, episode 2, there were like 4 different ones that I could choose from, and they were all right there. People still just this show's like a religion.
Yeah, you've got to love a show that has such a following that like even its advertising has been meticulously cataloged. It's pretty incredible. But I mean, going back and watching it now, first of all, it still looks great. Like, oh yeah. I mean, certainly the first season, it shows its age, just like through the technology and some of the terminology and stuff that they use. But I think that it's a show that holds up remarkably well over the years, certainly compared to like other shows that were around during this time. Now, the first episode that we saw, the host, that was shot in Canada. The first 5 seasons were actually shot in Canada. And then in the 6th season, I believe, they switched to Los Angeles. And the next episode that we're going to be talking about, which sets us up for X-Cops. It's time to talk about X-Cops. X-Cops. What a genius 45 minutes of television. I loved this episode. I can't remember. See, I was a big fan of Cops too. My dad loved the show Cops, so we would always watch the X-Files and Cops together. And the two worlds come together. The crossover of the century here, Cops and X-Files. First of all, if 2 of the big TV shows in your household were Cops and X-Files, this must have been like a watermark moment in the Patterson family. I don't remember. Like, I don't have any strong memories of this episode, and I'm sure that they made an event out of it. I'm sure that Fox was like advertising the heck out of this when it was
How
getting
exactly
ready.
do you advertise this episode?
It's the crossover of the century, man. Cops and the X-Files.
It's what everybody wanted.
I mean, those were probably 2 of their highest rated shows. I would imagine.
Definitely. I'm not sure just how you advertise this particular episode.
I love how the intro was, they just used the Cops intro, and
I love that,
and included Mulder and Scully in it. And I thought that was so great. There were a lot of little things that they did in this episode that I thought were really, really clever. Vince Gilligan wrote this episode, and he was a producer on the show, but you probably know him now for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So you had a strong writer behind this one. And so the premise is they are shooting an episode of Cops, and someone gets attacked, and they think that it might be a wolfman. A werewolf. They think that it might be a werewolf or some other creature, and Mulder and Scully come out to investigate too, and then the cops crew follows them around too, which I thought was so funny. The whole time Scully was just not having it. She was just not having this camera crew follow them around. Occasionally they would do these kind of funnier episodes, these more comedic episodes. I feel like they became more numerous in the later seasons, but this one was just, I had so much fun with this one. They would blur people's faces like in Cops, and they swore like crazy in this one, and they just bleeped it all out.
Apparently, Vince Gilligan did not want any kind of branding at all from the X-Files show. He just wanted it to look like completely like an episode of Cops, to the point where he did not even want the logo or theme to appear at any point during the episode. And they went along with a lot of what he said, and then also at no point during the show should the words X-Files ever appear on screen. And then they were like, okay, tone it down a bit, because they were worried how people would just get really confused.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it probably would have confused people, but I wish they would have done that. I mean,
that would have been even better.
So you have the Cops intro, and then you have the sort of setup, like in any X-Files episode, the opening sequence is like the setup for that week's, case or whatever. And it's following this cop around. He gets attacked by this creature. And then it does the regular X-Files intro. But the cool thing is during the commercial breaks, which they left so we watched this on Hulu. The whole series is on Hulu, by the way. They left the commercial break, little graphic things on there, and they changed, so it was like the standard X-Files logo, but they had the police sirens, so it was like exactly what they did for Cops during the commercial breaks for Cops, where
that was based on the reading that I'm doing of the Wikipedia article for the episode, which seems reasonably well sourced. That was one of the compromises that they came to, that Vince Gilligan came to with the network and the show, was that you need some kind of regular identification. This is an episode of the X-Files, but the compromise was you can change the bumpers.
Yeah, and I think that worked. Mm-hmm. That worked nicely. It was a really fun episode. I enjoyed it tremendously, and
it's just a blast of an idea that is pretty well committed to.
I also like those kind of more comedic episodes, because it feels like David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson are just having fun with it. Like, you see them smiling and laughing way more than in other episodes, and they don't seem to be taking it as seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives them a chance to just kind of be goofy, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of people complained about when they moved to LA. So apparently there was a marked decrease in the production quality when they moved to LA. And I don't know, I do plan on going through the series throughout this year, but I really don't remember any of the later seasons, so can't say for sure if that's the case. I remember there were more notorious episodes in the later seasons. There was a one episode where they were went undercover in some Leave It to Beaver type Stepford town, and I remember there's a lot of criticism around that episode.
Yeah, but yeah, otherwise, this introduction into the not really an introduction, this further examination of the X-Files, I think would leave me wanting to kind of poke around a little bit more.
For me, what I've been doing is I'll queue up the next episode, and if it's one that I happen to remember, one that doesn't seem super interesting or add much to the overarching narrative, I'll just kind of skip over it and move on to the next one. I'm kind of just taking it casually. I'm not being super strict about watching every second of it.
Mm-hmm.
But man, what a great show. I was telling you a couple days ago, I had this CD-ROM for my computer that was an X-Files CD-ROM that had sort of an encyclopedia of all the episodes up to that point. I don't even remember what season it was, probably 4 maybe or something.
That's such a great tie-in too. That's such a great idea.
Yeah, and it was like there were like really cool graphics, and it was like case files. So it was like sort of like a virtual FBI computer. So you could look through case files and you could look at all the different monsters that were in all the episodes, and they had video clips in there from some of the episodes and profiles like Fox Mulder, and it was like his FBI profile and stuff.
I think when you were telling me about that, I think I just said, just simply, we don't talk nearly enough about CD-ROMs on this podcast.
No, but Deep Rising had some CD-ROMs in it.
Oh yeah.
Some major CD-ROMs going on with that movie.
We'll get there.
Any closing remarks about the X-Files? I feel like this is a topic that we might return to later just because it's such a huge show. I could easily see us coming back and covering some more episodes. I would say that the 2 that we covered are, I don't know if they're considered to be classics. I really loved both episodes. So yeah, both of those are certainly worth checking out.
Next up, we have a horror film starring Tom Sizemore as a cop teaming up with an anthropologist, played by Penelope Ann Miller, to stop a lizard creature from eating people. Released on January 10th, 1997, this is The Relic.
From the producer of Aliens and Terminator 2.
33% Homo sapien.
Part human?
What are you talking about?
Gradual extinction of the human race. The Relic. Rated R. Starts Friday, January 10th.
A homicide detective and anthropologist try to destroy a South American lizard-like god who's on a people-eating rampage in a Chicago museum.
What a wild logline. That was so much of my impetus when we were looking through things to talk about in the show. I just read that and I knew it had to be in here.
It's this movie, so I was telling you offline, Relic, Phantoms, and what was the other one that we actually covered on this show? The Del Toro one. Mimic. Relic, Phantoms, and Mimic are 3 movies that I don't know what their proximity was in release dates, but I remember always getting those 3 movies mixed up at the video store. They all looked so familiar to me, and they all had a very similar plot line.
I don't remember much about Mimic because I think that was one of our first shows, but from what I can remember, it just seems to. I could see how this would probably also at one point blend in with me with Relic.
Yeah, Mimic was like the roach, like giant roach creature that was in the city, that it could make itself look like a person, sort of. So it was, pretty similar to Relic. Phantoms, I don't remember too much about at all. That was also a January release, but I really don't remember I don't remember much about that one at all. I want to revisit Phantoms, but we're talking about Relic. First of all, this is something that you brought up to me when you were watching it, and I immediately noticed it. This movie is so dark that I want to say I didn't know what was going on. I'd say half the movie.
Okay. So I start the movie. It's the free. It's like the streaming version on Amazon Prime. With all streaming services, you kind of have to worry about, especially Amazon, because as someone pointed out to me, if you're not specifically looking closely, you can end up paying to rent a movie that is actually currently streaming for free on Prime.
Oh yeah, because they had it. I noticed that when I was watching
this. Almost got me when I was rewatching The Silence of the Lambs recently, is that I almost rented it and then I scrolled down a little bit and I saw it was there was a version streaming.
Dirty.
So yeah. I don't think it's malicious. Maybe it is. I don't know. I think it's just Amazon just is a collection of so much stuff that there's just trillions of things existing concurrently.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, movie's hard to see. First, I thought that was like just the transfer that we had on Amazon, and then I look up this And then I looked at like reviews of the film on Blu-ray and DVD. Everybody mentions it, and then I kept going back and I was like, maybe there's just something wonky about how this is put on home video. And then I went back to reviews of it that ran when the movie was playing in theaters, and people mention it too. So that's just how the movie's supposed to be. The director, I believe Peter Hyams, this is a Peter Hyams movie, serves as his own cinematographer on it. So this was obviously what he was intentionally going for. Once you kind of get into the feeling of what it is, once you almost like your eyes somehow have to adjust to it, like being in a dark room. After a while, I didn't notice it quite as much, but initially, yeah, it was causing me a bit of trouble. Like, I was worried that I was going to have to, like, it almost became me just, like, live texting my complaints about this to you. Because, like, I kept saying it, cause I kept sending messages because I wasn't really watching as much. I was looking at it because I kept pausing to try and examine the frame to see if there was any information that I was missing in it.
It's crazy. It is baffling why they would do this. It's like, I mean, it's like they looked at the dailies and they were like, yeah, this looks great. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's like, what?
Peter, you've done it again.
Yes, I can see exactly what's happening in that, Peter. Great job.
I think the point is that you're not supposed to see it, which then opens up a whole other can of...
Yeah.
Anyway, once you get past that, this is, especially once you get in the second half, this is a pretty good movie about a lizard-like god, as they describe it, causing chaos through a museum and eating people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty solid overall, other than the complete blackness that it takes place. I mean, even when they're like, there's a scene where Penelope Ann Miller is like, she's like researching some stuff. She's on her like 90s computer with the ridiculous GUI and doing some searches and stuff. And even that scene when they're in that office doing the research, there's no lights on. And I'm like,
I'll do you one better. There are scenes in this movie that take place outside in broad daylight on a sunny day, and it's still really dim.
It's so strange.
Like, there's not a cloud in the sky, and it still has the general feeling of thin overcast.
It's like that movie Dark City. Only at least Dark City has an excuse.
About a city that's dark.
Man, I gotta rewatch Dark City. That is definitely going on our list. Big time. Gotta find a way to get Dark City in there, because I've been meaning to revisit that. I love the scene when Penelope Ann Miller calls the guy a gerbil. She goes, "You really are a gerbil."
Love it.
And it's like,
great performance.
What? What was it? I think she was saying that towards her coworker, who is comically evil.
In fact, a gerbil.
He is comically evil in this. Mm-hmm. I never understood, like, the way that they wrote that character was, to me, just too much. That guy was just too much.
Not quite as unpleasant to be around as the monster that eats people throughout most of the second half of this movie.
True.
And in the first half, but you don't really see quite as much of it there.
True. I was thinking, oh, well, they probably make the whole damn thing so dark so you don't really see the creature, but you do get to see a lot of the creature later on. And I will say that I thought that the effects work was pretty decent, except for there are a couple moments. There was one moment when the creature, when it jumped up, when that one like SWAT guy was trying to get out from the roof, he was like trying to climb back up, and you see it sort of jump out from the hole in like the skylight. And I thought that looked kind of rough, but other than that, I thought that the creature effects were quite good. I mean, even the CG I thought was pretty good looking, especially there's a scene where it's on fire. And I was like, wow, that looks really impressive for the time.
Yeah, like when the creature is on fire, it is spectacular.
It's, I mean, especially for 97, like that, I was I was impressed. It's certainly not on the same level as like Body Snatchers, because that kind of blew my mind. And I think Tremors actually looks better too with the practical effects. But with Relic, it's like it's a little different. It's an actual sort of, what's a lizard creature? It's like it's like barreling through a museum, so it requires more.
Yeah, it's a museum filled with people that are stuck in the museum at night in the darkness. Now, I think we mentioned this podcast before, since probably. But one of the environments is like, if you describe an environment that would give me the most anxiety and fear. It would just be, of course, being inside of an empty, large, dark building at night where like the only light you have are like the blood red glow of exit signs.
Yeah.
Well,
this movie has the second best rich person stampede that we'll be talking about this episode.
Oh, it's such a good stampede. Because like, and he also Hyams also seems like he's playing into like the fact that it feels like a slapstick comedy.
It's a pretty solid. We'll call it a wealthy stampede.
Yeah,
it's a pretty solid wealthy stampede. The one dude that just smashes through the display. Like, what are you doing, man? He just goes right through that display.
I agree.
Love rich people.
We are really building up the last movie we're going to talk about. Still, I agree. Not as great a stampede as the movie we'll talk about next.
Overall, I thought it was pretty fun. It was a good time. Like, comparing it to Mimic, I think I still enjoyed Mimic more than this because I thought Mimic was just more interesting. This movie, it really just boils down to a monster in a museum eating people pretty randomly.
Yeah,
I will say that it's pretty gory. A lot of heads.
Yeah.
A lot of heads getting ripped off.
Mm-hmm. As happens, I suppose.
Yeah. Anything else to add about The Relic?
Not really.
Our final film this month provides a delicious blend of action thriller with creature feature, directed by Stephen Sommers and released on January 30th, 1998. This is Deep Rising.
No one has survived. To tell them what happened on this ship.
There's something down here!
Now, the only question is...
They're wiping us out one at a time.
Who's next? Deep Rising. Rated R. Starts Friday.
A group of heavily armed hijackers board a luxury ocean liner in the South Pacific Ocean to loot it, only to do battle with a series of large-sized, tentacled, man-eating sea creatures who have taken over the ship first. Well, we have built up to this moment all throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Perhaps one of the most, once it gets going, maybe one of the most bonkers things we've talked about in a while.
We're going to go full scream ahead.
Deep Rising, full scream ahead. Adam, what did you think?
This movie, I saw this for the first time only a couple of years ago, and then I saw it again very recently. I think it was on TV or something, and I was like, oh well, I got to watch this now. And every time I see this movie, which this was maybe the second full time that I saw it. And it's a blast. It's dumb. It's not a good movie. It's pretty bad, but I always have fun with this movie. I think that it is incredibly overwritten. I think that it's a movie that thinks it's smarter than it actually is by a mile. But all of that being said, I think that it is still tremendously fun to just watch this group of people getting picked off one by one by this giant octopus-like tentacle creature on this luxury ocean liner, the Argonautica.
Yeah, when you mentioned earlier contrasting Tremors with a movie that is very grisly and features characters getting picked off one by one, this is a movie that is very grisly with characters getting picked off one by one, and it's a pretty good time.
Sure. It absolutely is a good time.
A lot of great, I suppose, asterisk extension to my comments, well documented throughout this podcast about movies that take place either in dark or singular spaces is continued here. First of all, some of the greatest cruise ship related disasters this side of the Poseidon Adventure.
Sure. Yeah. You're dealing, it's a very technologically advanced. I mean, this movie is like I would say this is almost straight up sci-fi.
This is very confused. The technology of this ship is very confusing.
I mean, even at the beginning, when we're first introduced to Treat Williams, who's the lead, he's this guy named John Finnegan who has a boat, and I guess he just takes people places for money. He just transports people, no questions asked. When they first show his boat and the way it looks, I'm like, that doesn't look like an actual boat. That's like a spaceship. Like the cockpit area, like his chair and everything, it's a freaking spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I find there to be this like almost sci-fi element to it. Like the guns that they use are kind of ridiculous looking, and I'm pretty sure those aren't real guns, like real life guns.
What was your first clue?
Like the triple barrel, like Gatlin machine gun thing that they have. I like the setup of this, where you have Treat Williams and his crew. They're taking these guys, and like obviously they should have known that this is a crew of people that we shouldn't be doing business with. But I guess they wanted the money, so it's like a group of mercenaries who want to board this cruise line and take all the money because it's nothing but rich people on this cruise.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get there, of course, this is already after disaster strikes and almost everybody's dead.
It is a pretty wild reveal in this movie that literally everybody on the boat has been eaten.
Yeah, save for like 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
You have Famke Jensen in there as her name's Trillian in this, which I thought was
as one does, as one is named
Trillian. She's a thief, and she somehow snuck her way onto the ship and was trying to steal, but she got caught like right away, and they locked her in the friggin' pantry. So somehow she was able to avoid getting eaten. And then you have Anthony Held as Simon, the owner of the ship. Now, it turns out that he was in cahoots with the hijackers and was helping them pull this heist. Do they even say why? Did they explain explicitly why he wanted to work with them on this?
Not to my recollection.
Because it seems to me like that would absolutely ruin him. Like, even if, like, let's say everything went perfectly and the hijackers came on board and stole all the stuff and he wasn't implicated anyway and they got away with it, I think his career would still be ruined. Like,
oh yeah,
he wouldn't be able to continue his career of luxury ship owner. So
probably not.
So I'm not really sure why he wanted to do this. Because I mean, he would have had to have a ton of money to finance that ship to begin with, since it's like the most technologically advanced ship in existence.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of somewhere I read that apparently at one point there's this conspiracy theory that the Titanic was not actually the Titanic. It was an older boat that was then called the Titanic, and the boat called the Titanic was called another older boat, and they wanted to sink the Titanic for insurance money. So they renamed it the Titanic with something that was not it, and they sunk it on purpose. It's just one of those completely insane conspiracy theories that makes no sense at all. That's exactly what this guy's deal is in this movie.
And of course, being that this character is played by Anthony Held, he's a total sleaze, and he backstabs every chance he gets along the way. I love the line when the ship first, because of course there's a giant storm. As I've said, I don't know if it was on this show or on another podcast. I believe that it is some sort of rule that if you have a movie where you're on a boat out at sea, there inevitably has to be a storm that rolls in at some point. And of course that happens here. And the captain was like, we're we're blind. We don't have any radar. We don't have any communications. We can't see where we're going. And he just goes, impossible. This ship is impervious to weather.
When I heard that line, all I could think about was airplanes. That's impossible. They're on instruments.
Which
is only the payoff to that joke, of course, only slightly more absurd than the idea that it is impervious to weather.
Impervious to weather.
I love the idea of this ship, by the way. Just the entire idea of it. Like, I love that apparently that they don't just have like a regular security key card system. They have one that's like a video monitor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just a person that talks to you, which is, once again, like, you've got to love movies. Like, especially this particular era of 90s movie that just used computers in a way, in like a pervasive way that also indicates absolutely no knowledge about computers, such as the extended business here about CDs.
Oh, yeah.
The central computer system.
Yeah. First,
when they're trying to shut down the ship.
First, I'll mention Famke Janssen is stuck in this pantry that is like electronically locked for some reason. Like, why would you have your pantry that just has produce electronically locked, and she has to like pull off a maintenance panel from inside the thing and like jam a key in it to short it out to open up the pantry? That doesn't make any sense. But then you have the triple vertical CD drives that pop out from this like console, and to completely shut the ship down, I guess they just remove. So the entire ship is running off of these 3 CD-ROMs, and they just swapped them out, and it just shut down the whole ship.
Like this minor detail, 3 blank CD-ROMs.
Right. I also love
there's nothing on them.
When you look at, so when they eject vertically,
and
you look at
that's not an actual thing. That's never actually been a thing, has it?
No, not like that. Not like a slot loader type.
Straight up.
I mean, I you know what? You could do that with. There were some CD-ROMs that you could do that with, like early days when people were starting to use like tower PCs. They would still be built like regular PCs, so the CD-ROM drives they would still come out from the front. They wouldn't come straight up from the top, but you could put the CD in vertically. Anyway, the thing that bugged me about that was if you looked at the core, the inside part where the CD, like where the hole is, and you like, stick it in, all that was like the inside of a jewel case of a CD. Like, it didn't spin. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
a CD-ROM it has a spindle in the middle, and it spins on ball bearings. But in this, it was literally just one of those.
CDs spin.
It was like literally just one of those plastic things that holds the CD in place.
I also liked a critic I know has written. Mike McGranahan has written extensively. Just as side remarks throughout the years about how when people are hacking, especially just hacking in movies, they never use a mouse.
Oh no,
mouses do not exist in movies.
They only use
another example of that. Literally typed in a bunch of keys to make the vertical CD drives rise up. Yeah,
man, they're using nothing but command line. They don't need mice. They're pro level. So
this is not the most ridiculous thing about this movie. We haven't even gotten to the actual monster yet.
No. Let's talk about the monster. It is.
Let's please.
So initially they think that it's multiple monsters. First of all, they're like, oh, there's like so many of them. They're all over the ship. It's just one monster. Now,
it's a big one though.
It is a very big monster, and it seems like its tentacles maybe have some sort of sentience on their own, sort of like Tremors, because they can navigate through the corridors of the ship. And what they do is they'll grab you and they'll suck you, they'll drag you around, they'll play with you a bit, and then they sort of like eat you, and they drink you. They ingest you, and then they drink your fluids. Somehow, the idiot owner of the ship knew what this creature was, like, or like a mutated version of whatever. Like he just knew that that's what this was.
Yes.
How he knew that? Like, imagine
he's not really the kind of person who knows anything.
Yeah, it's like, imagine if like this guy reminded me of Donald Trump. It's like if Donald Trump was like, oh, it's this really specific species that lives out here and lives in like the Mariana Trench or whatever, and is like has this really specific way of consuming its food. Like, come on.
Such a weird way. Like, I just like this idea that they had to deliver the information about this somehow, and they couldn't figure out anyone who would even have a chance of knowing it. So they just went with that guy.
Yeah, because there's no scientists. You know, usually there's like scientists involved in these movies. Like underwater, there were multiple scientists, so they could figure out what was going on and how to get out of the situation. But these people were like, the best thing you had going for you is that you knew the basic layout of the ship. Like that was the one skill that you had. So anyway, the creature eats you, and it's the effects work in this one. You know, the other movies that we talked about had pretty decent effects work. This one is holy cow,
atrocious.
This is like feels like early 90s CG right here. This came out in
98 in a $50 million movie.
Yeah, insane. Like, I mean, I understand like the sets did look very elaborate in this, and there were explosions and all of that stuff, but holy cow, did they skimp on the creature effects, because it looks so bad. Man, it looks so bad. It actually does detract from the movie watching it now, because it's just so silly.
It keeps getting worse until you see the entire creature all framed towards the end, and it's almost unfathomably bad.
Yeah, when it's under the water and it's dragging people around under the water, like that looks pretty good. And that's really it. That's really the only time when it's like almost completely submerged in the water and you can't see any of it.
Yeah.
Like that's when it works, when you can't see it. When you do see the full size creature, yes, it's just a cartoon. It's just like the most ridiculous thing ever. I think watching that, it almost adds to the fun factor of it, though.
Yeah, which is weird, because then the other sort of thing going on here is just how visceral it is, like just people walking through floors full of bloody skeletons.
Oh yeah, like the scene when they go to like the feeding floor or whatever, and it's like the entire everyone that was on board, like the hundreds of people. They're just corpses, just bloody skeletons everywhere. Yeah, I thought it was overall. I really do enjoy. I enjoy this type of movie. I liked these sort of contained thrillers that they don't always need to have some sort of supernatural entity involved, but it certainly helps. The Descent is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I think that handles it really well. And I really enjoyed Underwater, which came out this weekend again, and
a lot of great underwater talk on this episode.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen it, but
yeah, sorry, Ed. It's still fresh, so I'm still. Yeah. But
no.
But it just
it tangentially works into this episode.
I know, like it just really worked out that way. It really wasn't. We didn't plan on it. It just, especially because this episode's probably going to come out like 2 weeks after that movie came out.
Yeah, but you know,
I really do enjoy these types of movies, and I think that this is certainly not the cream of the crop. Let's be real. No. But it's pretty fun. nonetheless. I thought that Treat Williams,
mean, etc., etc.
Yeah, I thought that Treat Williams did a pretty good job in this. I don't think I've seen too many movies with him as like the leading man, but he had some good zingers in there. There's some funny moments. He was fine.
He carries it. He's capable.
Yeah.
All the way through until his catchphrase, "Now what?" I believe. I was reading the IMDb trivia of this movie, which of course everyone, because it's always weird and sometimes even true. Apparently, someone decided to devote an entire trivia item to the unverifiable claim that the script gives him the line, "What now?" But it was changed in the film to "Now what?" 26 of 31 people found it interesting.
All right. Sure.
It is. I mean, it's well delivered, especially in maybe one of the most bonkers final scenes of a movie we've ever done on the show.
Yeah. So let's break that down. So
yes.
So basically, everyone dies. It's actually it starts off with a pretty sizable amount of survivors. So a lot of people get.
So it won't last.
Yeah, a lot of people get picked off one by one until it's down to Famke Jensen and Treat Williams. They make it to this island and they realize that the comedic relief, Kevin J. O'Connor, is still alive, which is very rare for these movies.
Yes.
The comedic relief almost always dies.
Yes.
And so they're on this like tropical island in the middle of nowhere, and there's some sort of, I don't know if it's the same monster or
it might be.
I don't know how that works.
It's just the same one.
It can thrive on land, I guess. I don't know.
I guess.
And so you discover that there's another giant monster on the island that they're at, and then he does.
I mean, first of all, they need to learn how to live on an island. Second of all, they are 1,000% going to die.
Oh yeah.
You know what I wanted though?
Especially the comic relief dude.
Yes.
What is his character's name? Joey. Especially Joey, because he's been shot and has sustained other injuries.
Yes.
As well. So he's definitely dead.
I wanted him to be the only one that survived. I just think that would have been great if like only one character got to survive. I would want it to be him.
I do like in Deep Blue Sea that LL Cool J's character, the cook, he survives. He's one of he's not the only one, but he's one of like 3, I think. 2 or 3 that survived Deep Blue Sea.
I often randomly think about Deep Blue Sea.
Great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Great movie. Smart sharks. Intelligent sharks. They know
very
how to
smart
kill.
Sharks.
The creature in this movie is also smart. For some reason. That's the other thing. Like in Tremors too. Like inevitably these monsters start to learn. Like no matter what they are. Like in Tremors, they're just worms, but somehow they learn. Like when they start to dismantle the foundation of the house, and when they like strategically blow the tires in the truck.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how are these things learning so fast? Like, why their intelligence seems to be rapidly expanding.
Mm-hmm. Love it when that happens in a movie.
Yeah. So Deep Rising, I think it's a fun watch. I think it's worth a look, especially if you're into these, like especially like these underwater thrillers, like The Abyss and movies like
Underwater.
That one too. That is another one. What a terrible title.
Yeah. Still haven't seen it. Then I realized I was saying I haven't seen it, and then somehow that got it turned into still haven't seen it, which I've said about 10 minutes ago that I still haven't seen it. At no point in the last 10 minutes did I go away, see Underwater, and come back and report. I don't know why I said that. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I'm so tired.
I think you'll like it. I think you'll enjoy Underwater. I think Kristen Stewart kicks a lot of ass in it, but
she's great.
Yeah. So, what were your final thoughts on this batch this month? What was your take on the January monster movies?
I had a pretty good time with most of them. Couldn't tell you a single thing about most of the humans in any of these movies, but I'll think a lot about all of these great and sometimes terribly rendered CGI monsters. And I think mostly fun to talk about the X-Files.
Yeah.
Which I can see myself like going through more in the future.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to continue watching that series. That was one of the things I was most excited about with this batch that we're doing this month. I'd say that most of these movies are worth a look. There's a lot more monster movies that came out in the 90s, and I'm sure we'll revisit. I want to go back to Phantoms. I'll get Phantoms. Mark my words. One of these days, we will watch Phantoms. I think that's going to do it. I thank you ever so much for listening. You can send us an email at 90s@filmpulse.net or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at 90spod for daily 90s goodies. Now that it's a new year, I'm going to try to get back to sending out more TV listings and whatnot. I slacked for a little while over the holiday, but I'm going to try to get back into it, get back into the grind. Until next month, for Ken Bakley, my name's Adam Patterson, and this has been Saved by the 90s.
Bye, everyone.